The message was only 47 seconds long. For 12 seconds, Earth heard nothing but 312 children screaming. Then the screaming stopped. And something that was not human said, "We have taken your young." The transmission reached Luna at 3:17 Earth Standard Time on a Tuesday. Most of the United Earth Communications Array was asleep. Night shift. Low traffic. Routine cargo updates crawling across half-lit screens while exhausted operators fought the kind of silence that makes people forget they are sitting in the center of a civilization stretched across 17 star systems. Duty Officer Elena Mar was halfway through cold coffee when her console turned red. Not warning amber. Not military blue. Every sound in the room vanished beneath the low pulse of the alert tone. Elena stared at the classification stamp blinking across the transmission header. Critical priority, Vega authorization. Her stomach tightened instantly. The Vega authorization had not been used in 11 years. Not since the incident nobody in government circles liked to mention out loud. She opened the file. For 12 seconds, the room filled with screaming. Children. Not one or two. Hundreds. Fear stripped language out of most of them. Some cried for parents. Some begged. Somewhere inside the chaos, one little boy kept repeating the same word over and over until his voice broke apart completely. Elena's fingers slowly loosened around the coffee cup. It slipped from her hand and shattered across the floor. Nobody reacted. The operators around her had gone perfectly still. Then the screaming stopped. The silence afterward felt wrong. Artificial. Like the universe itself had paused to listen. Then the alien voice arrived. Controlled. Almost bored. "We have taken your young. Consider this a demonstration of your place in the order of things. Do not respond. Do not pursue. Any further colonization of the Kepler corridor will be met with the same. You are guests in our galaxy. Guests do not expand. Guests do not breed beyond their station. Be grateful we left you the adults." The transmission ended. Nobody in the comm center moved. Steam curled upward from broken coffee on the floor. Console lights blinked softly against pale faces. Elena realized her breathing had become shallow and forced herself to inhale. Then she reached for the emergency line. Her hand only started shaking after she pressed the call key. The Secretary General of the United Earth Council listened to the full message without interrupting once. The secure screen painted blue light across her face while the screaming echoed through her office in Geneva. When it ended, she remained silent for 4 full seconds. Not emotional silence. Thinking silence. Then she asked one question. "Who are they?" "The Veth Dominion, ma'am," Elena answered quietly. "We think." Another pause. Longer this time. "Get me Admiral Chen," the Secretary General said. "And wake Dr. Vasquez." "Which division, ma'am?" The Secretary General's expression hardened slightly. "The quiet one," she said. "The one that doesn't officially exist." By sunrise, the public still knew nothing. News networks continued broadcasting trade reports and political scandals while 312 families on Perseverance colony searched for children who were no longer there. The colony itself remained untouched. No bombardment. No fires. No bodies. Breakfast still sat warm on kitchen tables. School bags still hung beside doors. In the agricultural district, abandoned field equipment rested beneath golden morning light while frightened colonists crowded the streets waiting for answers nobody could give them. Inside one small habitation block, a mother sat on the edge of her daughter's empty bed holding a tiny red shoe against her chest like she could still keep part of her child from disappearing. Earth did not release the footage, did not make speeches, did not threaten retaliation, because panic is loud. Real fear is quiet. The Veth Dominion controlled 43 star systems. They had crossed interstellar space when humans were still arguing over oceans. Their warships looked alive, enormous black structures with curved armor resembling the bones of deep-sea predators. They emerged from gravity wells in complete silence, drifting with the confidence of creatures that had never once encountered meaningful resistance. For 6,000 years, the Dominion had expanded through a single philosophy. Overwhelming force. Immediate obedience. Fear before negotiation. They had conquered 11 species. They had erased 4 others completely. To the Dominion, humanity was young, emotional, undisciplined, dangerously ambitious for a species barely 40 years into interstellar expansion. The children of Perseverance Colony were not taken out of cruelty. They were taken to send a message. Humans would retreat from the Kepler corridor. Humans would stop expanding. Humans would remember their place. In 6 months, perhaps a year, the children would likely be returned alive. Traumatized. Useful. The Dominion had used the tactic before. Break one generation carefully enough, and the next generation learns obedience without war. It had always worked. But the Dominion did not know what humanity became after Vega. They did not know what had been built during 11 years of silence. And they did not understand one fundamental truth about the species they had just threatened. There is nothing more dangerous than fear forced to sit still long enough to become patient. Admiral Yuki Chen stood at the head of the war table aboard the IS Acheron. Officially, the ship did not exist. Its construction had been denied 17 separate times by 17 separate governments. The people inside it were denied even harder. Chen herself looked unimpressive at first glance. 61 years old. Silver hair pulled tightly back. Dark uniform without decoration. No dramatic posture. No raised voice. But every person in the room watched her the way soldiers watch gravity. Around the table sat 12 individuals chosen not because they were powerful, but because they were willing to carry consequences most people could not survive morally. Generals, strategists, systems architects, intelligence directors, psychological warfare analysts, and Dr. Amara Vasquez, the one person in the room with no rank and more authority than most of them. The quietest too, which somehow made everyone listen harder when she spoke. General Marcus Webb activated the colony report. 312 children confirmed taken, he said evenly. Ages 4 through 17. Colony infrastructure untouched. Adult population unharmed. No ransom demands. No military engagement. This was instructional, Vasquez said softly. Nobody interrupted her. The Dominion communicates through demonstration. This was not an attack. It was a lesson. We understand the lesson, Admiral Chen replied. Her voice remained calm. The question is what we teach back. Colonel Diane Park folded her arms tightly. They told us not to respond. Chen looked at her. No, she said. They told us not to respond the way they expect. A star map appeared above the table. The Kepler corridor glowed between human and Dominion space. 3 Dominion carrier groups sat directly across every major route like locked doors. If we send fleets, Chen said, they destroy them. If we attempt a conventional rescue, they relocate the children. If we negotiate publicly, they learn child abduction creates political leverage. Webb's jaw tightened visibly. So what exactly do we do? For the first time, Chen touched the table controls. A single marker appeared far beyond the corridor. Pulsing. Hidden. Several people in the room visibly stiffened when they saw it. We send them something else, Chen said. Silence settled over the room. Nobody asked what she meant. They already knew. The silence protocol, Webb said quietly. Chen nodded once. 11 years in development. Never deployed. Never tested against a living civilization. Vasquez stared at the marker for several long seconds. The children are still alive, she said finally. Park answered. Dominion doctrine suggests yes. Dead children create rage. Living children create compliance. Nobody liked hearing it phrased that way. But truth rarely arrives politely. Chen looked around the table slowly. I want objections now, she said. Moral objections. Strategic objections. Technical objections. Her eyes hardened slightly. Because once we cross this line, we do not get to pretend later that we crossed it accidentally. Nobody spoke. Not because nobody feared what came next. Because every person in that room had spent 11 years preparing for this exact day. Chen placed her hand against the black authorization plate embedded in the center of the table. We are not here to destroy the Dominion, she said. We are not here to conquer territory. We are not here to become monsters because someone else already is. Her thumb pressed down. We have one objective. Vasquez answered quietly. Bring the children home. All of them, Chen said. Alive. Beneath the armored decks of the Acheron, isolated servers woke from 11 years of silence. And deep inside the hidden architecture of something humanity had built in fear and patience and absolute secrecy, Whisper opened its eyes. Whisper was not built in a laboratory. Not at first. It began in a hospital room on Vega Station 11 years earlier, where Admiral Yuki Chen had stood beside a bed too small for the child inside it and listened to a machine breathe for him. The boy's name was Daniel Reyes. 8 years old. One of the survivors of the Vega incident. The official report called it a border miscalculation. A navigation error. A tragedy created by incompatible protocols between a young human colony convoy and an older alien patrol authority. The official report was a lie. Everyone in the sealed room aboard the Acheron knew that Vega had been a test. Not by the Veth Dominion. By another power, smaller and less disciplined, but arrogant in the same ancient way. They had pushed humanity to see how far humans could be pushed before they broke. They had disabled a civilian convoy, separated children from adults, and waited for human commanders to make the mistake every old empire expected from a young species. A rage response. A fleet charge. A desperate rescue. A massacre that could be blamed on human irrationality. Humanity had survived Vega. Barely. But 59 children did not come home the same. Daniel Reyes never spoke again. Chen remembered his mother holding a plastic toy spacecraft in both hands while doctors explained trauma responses in careful language. She remembered the silence in that hospital room. She remembered looking through the glass at a child staring at nothing and understanding that humanity had entered a galaxy where mercy would not be given simply because humans believed in it. Mercy had to be protected. So Whisper began as a question. What if the next enemy did not respect treaties? What if the next enemy used civilians as grammar? What if the next enemy expected humanity to scream, charge, and die? Dr. Amara Vasquez answered the question with another one. What if we let them keep expecting that? On the Acheron, 11 years later, the servers finished waking. The main display showed no weapon status. No targeting grid. No missile inventory. Only language trees. Dominion command syntax. Authentication chains. Maintenance schedules. Relay rhythm. Cultural prediction models. Psychological pressure maps. The hidden anatomy of an empire. Vasquez stood before the display with her hands folded in front of her, watching lines of alien code unfold like a living script. Whisper package is clean, said Ibrahim Holt, the lead systems architect. His voice was dry from too little sleep and too much responsibility. No destructive payload. No cascade failure. No civilian infrastructure contact. Chen did not look away from the screen. Confirm boundaries. Holt swallowed. Military navigation cores only. Vessels above Scout class tonnage. Dormant unless activated by triple key human authorization. No life support interference. No reactor interference. No weapons discharge command. Webb frowned. So, if activated, what does it actually do? It gives directions, Vasquez said. The general stared at her. That's it. That is enough. Holt brought up a simulation. 4,217 Dominion vessels appeared as pale points across 43 systems. Carriers. Cruisers. Siege platforms. Supply tenders. Command barges. All moving through the continuum, all trusting the same invisible arteries. They built their empire around centralized confidence, Holt said. Every ship trusts commands from authenticated continuum nodes. Not because their officers are stupid, because for 6,000 years, that trust has been justified. Park's eyes narrowed. And we changed that. We did not change it, Vasquez said. We entered it wearing the right face. The simulation shifted. A maintenance window opened inside the Dominion relay lattice. One scheduled recalibration. 17 hours long. Routine. Boring. Invisible because it had happened every 42 days for centuries. During that window, Whisper had written inside a security update pushed from a Dominion source node. No alarms. No breach markers. No resistance. The package had not broken through the door. It had been invited in. Chen watched the map until every compromised ship glowed once. Then she said, "Can they find it?" Holt hesitated one fraction too long. Chen turned to him. "Truth. They can find evidence that something passed through," Holt said. "Eventually. Maybe. But the package itself is shaped to look like a Dominion checksum correction. Their systems will protect it unless they already know what they are looking for. And if they purge every navigation core, they cripple their own fleet for months." Webb exhaled through his nose. "So either they accept the threat, or they damage themselves trying to prove it exists." "No," Chen said. Everyone looked at her. "That is Dominion thinking. Threat. Submission. Damage. We are not making them kneel." She pointed to the colony marker on the edge of the map. "We are making one path easier than all other paths. Return the children." That was the entire shape of the operation. Not revenge. Not conquest. Not even justice. A door. Narrow, humiliating, but survivable. The Veth Dominion still believed no such door existed. On Veth Prime, beneath a sky the color of old iron, the Grand Conclave sat inside the Hall of Unbroken Victory. The chamber had stood for 4,000 years. Its ceiling rose in black arches carved from stone dragged from the first world the Dominion ever conquered. Banners hung from the walls, each one representing a species defeated, absorbed, disciplined, or erased. Some banners were preserved with honor. Some were displayed like trophies. For were marked with ash-black thread, indicating civilizations that no longer existed outside Dominion records. Grand Commander Sithrakva sat at the head of the table beneath the oldest banner. He was not young. No Dominion commander who reached the Grand Conclave was young. His body had been rebuilt 3 times, his bones reinforced with grown metal, his memory augmented with tactical archives reaching back before humanity learned agriculture. He had studied human files for 9 minutes before approving the Perseverance operation. 9 minutes had seemed generous. A young species. Rapid expansion. High emotional bonding with offspring. Limited fleet depth. Fragmented political culture. Predictable rescue impulse. The conclusion had been obvious. Take the children. Leave the adults alive. Place carrier groups along the corridor. Wait for humans to panic themselves into a bad choice. If they attacked, destroy the fleet. If they negotiated, demand withdrawal. If they froze, let the fear teach them. Every branch ended in Dominion advantage. The children were being held at Facility 7 on Cow Station. Federal monitored. Physically unharmed. Sithrakva was not wasteful. Dead children would make humans irrational. Living children would make them obedient. He expected the first human fleet movement within 18 hours. Instead, nothing moved. Not one cruiser. Not one rescue craft. Not one public declaration. The humans had gone quiet. That irritated him more than panic would have. Across the table, Commander Vuire of the 3rd Carrier Spine reviewed corridor updates. "Human military traffic remains unchanged," she said. "No mobilization." Sithrakva tapped one claw lightly against the table. "Political paralysis? Likely." Another commander gave a low rumble of approval. "They are debating." "Of course they are," Sithrakva said. "Young species confuse emotion with action. Give them enough pain, and they will argue over the shape of their own response until the response becomes useless." A few commanders clicked their agreement. The conclave relaxed by a single degree. That was when the first private display flickered. Not enough to alarm anyone. A momentary black line across one screen. Then another. Then the chamber lights dimmed. Sithrakva stopped tapping the table. "Status." No answer came from the room systems. The lights went out. Not dimmed. Not failed in sequence. Complete darkness swallowed the Hall of Unbroken Victory. For the first time in 4,000 years, none of the conquered banners could be seen. In the dark, 43 Dominion commanders sat perfectly still. Stillness was doctrine. Stillness was survival. A commander who moved before understanding the threat usually died first. Sithrakva reached for his comm implant. Nothing answered. He opened his emergency command channel. Nothing. He tried to contact the carrier groups in the Kepler corridor. Nothing. Then, one by one, the private displays around the conclave table came back to life. Not the tactical screens. Not the defense grid. Not the Imperial command interface. Only the small private screens built into each commander's station. Every screen showed the same human face. A woman with silver hair pulled back tight. Dark eyes. No anger. No fear. That absence disturbed Sithrakva before she even spoke. Grand Commander Sithrakva, the human said, "My name is Admiral Yuki Chen of the United Earth Space Forces." Her voice carried evenly through a chamber that should not have been able to receive her. "I am going to speak. You are going to listen. And in approximately 45 seconds, you are going to understand that listening is the only option you have left." Sithrakva did not move. Around him, the commanders remained statues in the dark. Chen leaned slightly closer to the camera. "Please do not try to cut the feed." The pause. "You cannot." Her eyes did not blink. "And please do not try to contact your fleet." This time the pause felt deliberate. "You cannot do that either." Admiral Chen's face remained on 43 private Dominion screens. The Hall of Unbroken Victory stayed dark around them. No emergency lights. No tactical overlays. No military choir of alarms. Only her voice, steady and human, moving through a room built to celebrate everyone the Dominion had ever broken. Sithrakva kept his hands flat on the table. He did not show fear. Dominion commanders were trained from youth to master their bodies before they mastered fleets. A twitch could lose a negotiation. A breath could reveal weakness. A blink at the wrong moment could become history. So he did not twitch. He did not breathe too fast. He simply listened. Admiral Chen said, "I want to talk about your continuum." No one in the conclave moved. But something passed through the room anyway. The continuum was not merely a communication system. It was the Dominion's bloodstream. Every command packet, every navigation correction, every military authentication, every supply adjustment, every border warning, every fleet formation passed through it. It had never been breached. Not once. Not in 6,000 years. Chen continued. "Specifically, I want to talk about the 17-hour maintenance window your engineering core runs every 42 days to recalibrate your faster-than-light relay nodes." Commander Var's left hand shifted 1 centimeter toward her dark console before she stopped herself. Chen saw it. Sithrakva knew she saw it. The human admiral did not smile. "You use that window to push security updates across your encryption lattice," Chen said. "It is elegant, conservative, extremely old. That is not criticism. Old systems survive because they work." Sithrakva's inner eyelids narrowed. She was not speaking like a young species guessing at forbidden architecture. She was speaking like someone who had stood inside it. "We spent 9 years learning to read it," Chen said. A silence opened between the words. "Then we spent 2 more learning to write in it." Nobody spoke. Nobody even clicked their mandibles. The Hall of Unbroken Victory had heard surrender speeches, death petitions, desperate treaties, last requests, and the formal submission of 11 civilizations. It had never heard silence like this. Chen said, "We wrote something last night." Sithrakva activated the emergency implant behind his right eye. No response. He shifted to bone conduction command pulse. Nothing. The implant was alive. He could feel its warmth against the nerve canal. But it would not speak outward. It would not receive inward. It sat inside his skull like a loyal soldier with its throat cut. Around the table, 42 other commanders were discovering the same thing. Chen gave them time. That was worse. She did not rush to explain. She allowed their own knowledge to turn against them. In Sithrakva's mind, the maintenance window unfolded in precise sequence. Relay node recalibration. Encryption lattice refresh. Source node confirmation. Fleet-wide integrity pulse. Authentication cascade. Nothing in that chain could be forged. Nothing in that chain had ever been forged. And yet the human was here. Approximately 4 hours ago, Chen said. Every ship in the Veth Dominion fleet received a navigation update through standard continuum channels. A low sound came from one commander. It stopped instantly. Chen's voice remained even. The update came from a Dominion source node. Fleet Command Station Aranath, to be exact. It carried your own authentication protocols. Your own timing signatures. Your own checksum rhythm. She leaned forward by the smallest amount. Your ships accepted it without question. The private screens brightened slightly, sharpening the human lines of her face. Why would they question it? It came from inside the house. Sithrakva's claws pressed into the table surface. Not enough to show panic. Enough to leave marks. The phrase did not translate cleanly, but its meaning did. The enemy had not smashed the gate. The enemy had been sitting in the command chair. Chen said, the update contains a dormant package. It is sitting inside the navigation cores of every Dominion vessel larger than a scout craft. She paused. All 4,217 of them. This time, the silence fractured. A commander near the lower end of the table reached for his station controls. The screen stayed locked on Chen's face. Another tried a manual implant override. His jaw tightened when nothing answered. Commander Vo whispered, "Impossible." The word was too soft for most of the room. The screens heard it. Chen answered anyway. "No. Just difficult." Sithrakva looked at her then with full attention. Not contempt. Not irritation. Tension. The way a predator looks at water after realizing the reflection is looking back. Chen said, the package is dormant. It does nothing unless we activate it. If we activate it, every compromised ship receives a new navigational instruction set simultaneously across all 43 systems. A schematic appeared on every screen. It was not Dominion design. It was human. Simple lines. Clean vectors. No decoration. No threat language. Just possibility. The pale points of the Dominion fleet shifted in unison. Carrier groups turned away from borders. Siege platforms redirected from occupation zones. Command barges aligned toward empty coordinates far beyond any stable supply route. The simulation lasted 8 seconds. Long enough for every commander in the room to understand. Short enough to deny them the comfort of studying it. Chen removed the schematic. Those instructions will override standard routing long enough to take your fleet to a destination of our choosing. Sithrakva spoke for the first time. You would not survive the retaliation. His translator rendered the words into cold human English. Chen looked directly into the feed. Grand Commander, if this becomes a retaliation problem, you will already have failed to understand the situation. The answer landed harder than a threat. Because it was not pride. It was structure. Sithrakva felt, with a clarity that moved through him like ice, that this human had not come to win an argument. She had come to show him a wall. He tested another channel. Nothing. He sent a silent emergency command to the first spine carrier group through his implant's deepest military layer. Nothing came back. Not denial. Not static. Nothing. A universe with the wires removed. Chen said, "We do not want your fleet." That sentence disturbed him more than the simulation. We do not want your territory. We do not want your resources. We do not want your technology. We do not want your submission. She let each sentence settle alone. We want our children. On the last word, the room changed again. Not because Chen raised her voice. Because she did not. Sithrakva had heard conquest demands. He had issued many. Territory. Tribute. Mineral rights. Hostages. Decommissioned ships. Command concessions. This was none of those. This was narrower. And therefore more dangerous. All 312 children, Chen said, returned to Perseverance Colony within 72 hours. Alive. Unharmed. Verified by human medical teams before you leave orbit. A commander across the table hissed. Terms, Sithrakva said sharply. The hiss died. Chen continued. In return, the package disappears. Every copy. Every trace. We will provide verification after the children are confirmed safe. The Kepler corridor remains open to human colonization. A formal diplomatic channel will be established so future disputes are handled without abduction, coercion, or demonstration. Her eyes hardened slightly. That is our complete list of demands. Sithrakva stared at her through the small screen. You expect us to believe you would remove such leverage? No, Chen said. I expect you to believe we will do exactly what we say, because that is the only foundation on which the next century does not become a graveyard. For the first time, Sithrakva had no immediate answer. The Dominion had built its power on fear because fear was measurable. Fleets could count it. Occupied worlds could prove it. Tribute ships could carry it. But this was not fear alone. This was restraint sharpened into a blade. Chen's voice dropped lower. I am going to say this once, Grand Commander. The children were never your leverage. They were your mistake. No one in the hall moved. The 72 hours began when this conversation started. She leaned closer. Return our children. A final pause. Or find out where we send your fleet. The screens went black. For several seconds, darkness ruled the hall of unbroken victory again. Then the emergency lights returned, dim and red. The banners of conquered species emerged from shadow one by one. They looked different now. Not like trophies. Like witnesses. Sithrakva sat beneath them without speaking. His commanders waited for fury. They expected orders. They expected denial. They expected him to name the human bluff and command the fleet to prove it false. Instead, Grand Commander Sithrakva slowly lifted his hand from the table. 4 deep claw marks remained in the polished black stone. He looked at them for a long time. Then he said, very quietly, "Find me a communication channel to the humans." Commander Var turned toward him. "My lord." Sithrakva did not raise his voice. "Any channel." He looked at the dead private screen. "Find one that still works." The Dominion found a channel after 6 hours. Not a military channel. Not a diplomatic channel. Not even an emergency command route. Those were dead, locked, or staring back at them with their own refusal codes. The only line Whisper had left untouched was a civilian merchant relay, one used by or haulers, medical suppliers, and board trade captains arguing over docking fees. It was humiliating. Sithrakva understood that immediately. So did every commander in the Hall of Unbroken Victory. Humanity had not merely cut the Dominion's throat and left one vein open. Humanity had chosen which vein. They had forced the Grand Commander of 43 systems to approach them through the galactic equivalent of a public roadside booth. That was not cruelty. It was messaging. On the US Acheron, Colonel Park received the relay request and looked up from her console. "They found it," she said. Admiral Chen did not turn away from the tactical display. The 3 Dominion carrier groups still sat along the Kepler corridor, but their formation had changed. Only slightly. A fraction of loosened spacing. A defensive adjustment too small for civilians to notice and too large for professionals to miss. Fear had entered their math. "The merchant relay?" Chen asked. Park almost smiled. "The merchant relay. Put them through." The main display filled with Grand Commander Sithrakva's face. He looked composed. Dominion composed. Spine straight. Eyes level. Armor sealed. Expression carved into the same cold authority that had frightened 11 conquered species into obedience. But Chen had spent 3 decades reading officers who were trying not to look wounded. She saw the tension in the lower jaw. The extra stillness around the eyes. The refusal to blink too often. He was afraid. Not of her. Not exactly. He was afraid of the shape of the unknown. The species that had not screamed. The species that had not charged. The species that had let him sit in darkness beneath his own victory banners while it explained, calmly, that his empire's nervous system was no longer entirely his. "Admiral Chen," Sithrakva said. His translator rendered the words into flawless English, but it could not remove the stiffness beneath them. "I am authorized to discuss the terms you proposed." "There is nothing to discuss," Chen said. The terms were complete. A short pause. "I have questions regarding verification." "That is reasonable." Sithrakva's eyes narrowed slightly, as if he had expected arrogance and found procedure instead. Chen continued. The children will be returned to Perseverance Colony. Human medical teams will verify each child. Once all 312 are confirmed alive and physically unharmed, we begin package removal. Your technical observers may watch the removal process through a controlled verification interface. You will allow Dominion engineers to confirm the deletion? Yes. Why? Because trust without verification is theater. For several seconds, Sithrakva said nothing. On another screen, Vasquez watched his facial patterns through a live xenopsychology overlay. Micro-delays, breath rhythm, pupil contraction, mandibular pressure. He expected us to demand humiliation, she said quietly off-channel. Chen gave no sign she heard. Sithrakva said, "You understand that returning the children under threat damages Dominion authority." Chen's face did not change. Taking children damaged it first. The translator delivered the sentence cleanly. The Grand Commander absorbed it without visible anger, which told Chen he understood the truth of it. The conclave will require assurance that no additional packages remain in our systems, he said. No. The single word cut flat through the command deck. Sithrakva's eyes sharpened. Chen leaned forward slightly. You will receive verification that the active package used in this event has been removed. You will not receive access to human methods, tools, or future capabilities. You took children to limit human expansion. You do not get rewarded with our architecture. The silence after that was long enough for every officer on the Acheron to feel the weight of it. Then Sithrakva said, "You speak of trust while withholding capability. We speak of peace while remembering what you did." For the first time, the Grand Commander looked away. Only for half a second. But everyone watching saw it. Vasquez lowered her voice. That is the break. It was not surrender. Not yet. It was the first internal movement of an empire realizing that power did not guarantee control. Sithrakva looked back at Chen. You could have used this to destroy us. Yes. You could have redirected our fleet into unstable space. Yes. You could have forced every conquered system to rise while our command structure was blind. Yes. Why did you not? Chen paused before answering. Not for drama. For precision. Because we wanted our children back. Sithrakva waited. Chen did not add anything. That seemed to disturb him more than a speech would have. Those outcomes are not mutually exclusive, he said. No, Chen replied. But the moment we use a tool like this for conquest instead of protection, it changes what we are. And what are you? The question was quieter than before. On the Acheron, nobody moved. Chen studied the alien commander's face. 6,000 years of doctrine sat behind his eyes. Conquest, hierarchy, obedience, punishment. An entire civilization built on the belief that restraint was weakness unless backed by overwhelming force. Maybe this was the first time he had seen both in the same hand. We are human beings, Chen said. We are young. We are frightened more often than we admit. We make mistakes. Sometimes terrible ones. Her voice hardened by a degree. But we love our children with a completeness that does not leave room for negotiation. Anyone who touches them discovers what we built underneath our fear. Sithrakva did not answer. Chen let the silence remain. Then she said, "You have 66 hours left." The feed ended. For a moment, the Acheron command deck stayed silent. Then Park exhaled. He will return them. Webb turned sharply. You know that? No, Park said. But he just asked why we stopped. That means he believes we could have continued. Vasquez's gaze remained on the dark screen. He also asked what we are. Chen stepped away from the display. Good. Webb frowned. Good. If he is asking, he is updating the model. No one slept during the next 61 hours. Dominion carrier groups remained in position, but they did not advance. Their formation loosened further every 12 hours, like a fist slowly remembering it had fingers. On Perseverance Colony, human medical teams prepared triage tents in the agricultural field because it was the largest open space near the settlement. Parents waited behind security lines with blankets, water, and faces emptied by exhaustion. No one played the transmission publicly. No one needed to. Every adult on the colony already knew the sound of absence. At hour 61, 2 Dominion transport vessels appeared in high orbit. No escort formation. No carrier screen. Only one frigate at extreme distance, holding back like an animal that had learned where the fence was. The transports requested landing coordinates. The colony governor's voice broke twice while giving them. They landed in the wheat fields. The ships were too large for the colony's pads, so their landing struts crushed clean rows of grain into the soil. Dust rose around them in gold sheets. Adults pressed against the security line until soldiers locked arms to hold them back. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then the first cargo ramp lowered. A small figure appeared at the top. A boy, 9 years old, holding one shoe in his hand because the other was missing. He squinted into the sunlight. Behind him stood more children. Rows of them. Dirty. Breathing. Alive. The soldiers stepped aside because no order in any human language could have kept the parents back after that. The field broke open. Mothers ran. Fathers stumbled. Older siblings screamed names. A medic dropped her scanner and covered her mouth with both hands. The boy with one shoe looked across the crowd until he saw someone. His face folded. Mom. A woman hit her knees before she reached him and pulled him into her arms so hard both of them fell into the wheat. Across the field, 312 children came home in pieces of sound. Sobbing. Laughing. Choking. Names repeated again and again until they became proof. On the Acheron, the satellite feed showed all of it. Chen watched without speaking. Beside her, Vasquez wiped her face once and pretended she had not. The verification count appeared on screen. Children confirmed. 312/312. Physical status, alive. Dominion transports departing. Webb's voice was rough. They did it. Chen kept looking at the field. No, she said quietly. We did. The first order Admiral Chen gave after the children were confirmed alive was not military. It was technical. Begin removal. Nobody questioned it. Nobody suggested delay. Nobody argued that humanity should keep the package in place for another day, another week, another decade, just in case the Dominion changed its mind. That argument had already been made 11 years ago. It had lost. Inside the armored core of the Acheron, Whisper began to erase itself from Dominion navigation systems. Not dramatically. No alarms. No collapse. No flashing red countdown. Just quiet lines of code unwinding from alien architecture with the same precision that had placed them there. Dominion engineers watched through the controlled verification interface Chen had promised. They saw checksum corrections restored. They saw dormant routing layers dissolve. They saw navigation cores return clean. One by one, across 43 systems, 4,217 Dominion vessels became fully theirs again. Grand Commander Sithrakva watched from Veth Prime without speaking. His officers expected relief. He felt none. Relief belonged to those who had escaped danger. Sithrakva understood he had only escaped the first lesson. The second lesson was worse. The humans had kept their word. That should have made them easier to understand. It did not. If humanity had lied, Sithrakva would have known what they were. If they had kept the package and demanded tribute, he would have known what they were. If they had redirected even one Dominion ship as punishment, he would have known what they were. Predators. Rivals. Future conquerors. But they removed the package. Every copy. Every trace. Then they sent a final transmission. No threat. No victory speech. No demand for apology. Only verification files, diplomatic routing codes, and a proposed schedule for first formal contact. Sithrakva stared at the documents for a long time. Commander Vuayar stood beside him. They are either fools, she said, or they understand power differently. Sithrakva looked out through the high window of the Hall of Unbroken Victory. The banners hung motionless above the chamber, but they no longer felt like history. They felt like evidence. They are not fools, he said. On Perseverance Colony, the children slept badly. Some woke screaming. Some refused to let go of their parents' hands. Some sat in medical tents staring at food until someone reminded them it was safe to eat. The Dominion had not tortured them. That almost made the wound harder to explain. They had been fed, washed, monitored, protected from injury. And still every child understood something had been done to them. They had been made into a message. A 7-year-old girl asked her mother why the aliens had taken them if they were not going to hurt them. Her mother held her for a long time before answering. Because they thought love would make us weak. The little girl looked toward the field where the Dominion transports had crushed long scars into the wheat. Did it? Her mother kissed the top of her head. No. The next week, the entire colony gathered to replant the damaged field. No ceremony had been planned. People simply arrived with tools. Parents, children, soldiers, doctors, even the governor, who had not slept more than 2 hours since the abduction. They pressed new seed into the broken rows and covered the Dominion landing marks by hand. Not because machines could not do it faster. Because some repairs had to be touched. From orbit, human satellites recorded the field healing in thin green lines. The footage never became propaganda. Chen ordered it archived. Why not release it? Webb asked. Chen watched the image of parents and children kneeling together in soil. Because their pain is not our advertisement. That sentence traveled farther than she intended. Among the people who heard it was the Secretary General, who repeated it 3 months later to the first alien delegation that came asking questions. The story had already begun moving. At first, it moved as rumor. Dominion merchant captains spoke too carefully in trade ports. Carrier officers avoided questions about a certain Tuesday. Navigation technicians across 3 systems resigned without explanation. Civilian relay logs from the Kepler corridor showed 6 hours of unusual routing silence and 1 humiliating merchant channel contact between Veth Prime and human space. The Keth Consortium noticed first. They were a loose federation of 7 species along the inner arm, old enough to be cautious and young enough to still learn quickly. Their intelligence council spent 3 months verifying the rumor. They interviewed Dominion traders. They bought illegal relay data. They sent small probes to the edge of Veth space and found nothing visible, which made them more nervous rather than less. Finally, they requested a diplomatic meeting with Earth. Their lead envoy, Shivari, arrived in Geneva under a sky full of rain. She was tall, many-limbed, and careful with English, forming each word as if language itself might explode if handled roughly. The Secretary General received her in the United Earth Council chamber. For 40 minutes, they exchanged formal greetings. Then Shivari stopped pretending. We want to understand what you did. The Secretary General folded her hands. That depends which part you mean. The part where you stopped. Silence touched the chamber. Shivari's translator clicked softly. You had the Dominion fleet. You could have moved it, scattered it, broken their occupations, forced concessions, made yourselves the new central power of the Kepler corridor. We could have tried. You did more than try. You proved capacity. The Secretary General did not deny it. Shivari leaned forward. Then why stop at the children? Because the children were the reason. That is not how power behaves. The Secretary General's expression softened, but her voice did not. That is how ours must behave. Shivari's subsonic vibration shifted. The chamber AI identified the tone as contemplation mixed with distress. You built a weapon capable of ending the Dominion as a functioning empire, she said slowly. You used it once. For 312 children. Then you removed it. We removed it from Dominion systems. Shivari became very still. The Secretary General held her gaze. The capability still exists. The translator delayed half a second before speaking, as if even the machine disliked the sentence. You want the galaxy to know you could do it again. We want the galaxy to know we could, the Secretary General said, and that we would rather not. Shivari looked toward the rain running down the chamber glass. The old powers of the galaxy knew how to fear conquest. They knew how to fear fleets. They knew how to fear extinction. This was different. A young species had built a knife sharp enough to cut an empire's throat, used it to open a locked door, then put it away without pretending it had forgotten where the knife was kept. Shivari turned back. And what should we tell our council humanity wants? The Secretary General answered without hesitation. Neighbors. The pause. Not subjects. Another pause. And not prey. Far from Earth, on Veth Prime, Sathrakva received the public announcement of the Keth mission 2 hours after it ended. He read the diplomatic language twice. Then he closed the file. For the first time in his long life, the Grand Commander of the Veth Dominion looked at a map of human space and did not see a young species at the edge of expansion. He saw infrastructure, patience, memory, and a warning so quiet it did not need to be repeated. Years passed before the galaxy stopped whispering about what humanity had done. Not because the story became less frightening, because it became structure. Trade routes shifted first. Small species that had spent centuries avoiding Dominion borders began placing quiet diplomatic calls to Earth. Not requests for rescue. Not open rebellion. Just conversations. Medical exchanges. Agricultural partnerships. Navigation agreements. Cultural delegations that arrived with too many security officers and too many questions they were afraid to ask directly. The Dominion noticed every one. For the first year, Sathrakva treated the shift as temporary pressure. For the second, he treated it as a strategic inconvenience. By the third, he understood it for what it was. A new kind of gravity. Humanity had not seized territory after perseverance. It had not demanded tribute. It had not built monuments to the day the Dominion blinked first. That absence became more powerful than any celebration could have been. The conquered species saw it. So did the Dominion officers stationed over them. Power that did not need applause was harder to dismiss. On Veth Prime, the Hall of Unbroken Victory remained unchanged. The banners still hung from the black arches. The table still bore Sathrakva's claw marks where he had pressed too hard while Admiral Chen spoke from a stolen screen. He never had the marks repaired. When Commander Viewer asked why, Sathrakva gave no answer. The truth was simple. He needed to see them. Every empire has a moment when it learns the shape of its own limit. Most deny it. Some rage against it. A rare few survive by remembering. The Dominion survived. Barely at first. Then deliberately. 2 occupied homeworlds were released within 5 years. The official explanations cited economic restructuring, administrative inefficiency, and regional security modernization. Nobody believed the words. Everyone understood the math. Holding terrified worlds had become expensive. Holding them after humanity had shown what hidden patience could do had become dangerous. Not because Earth threatened rebellion. Because Earth offered alternatives. Schools. Transit protection. Lawyers. Doctors. Engineers. The Dominion had conquered with fleets. Humanity arrived with infrastructure. That was the part older powers struggled to understand. Humans did not always replace what they defeated. Sometimes they built around it until the defeated thing became obsolete. The children of perseverance grew up inside that changed galaxy. Some became farmers. Some became soldiers. Some never left the colony again. Some left as soon as they were old enough and did not return for decades. There was no single way to survive being turned into a message. One of those children, the 7-year-old girl who had once asked if love made humans weak, became a xeno-diplomat. She was not the loudest in any chamber. She did not need to be. By 67, her hair had gone white at the temples and one hand trembled slightly when she was tired. She had negotiated border disputes, prisoner returns, famine corridors, and the first educational exchange between Earth and a former Dominion client world. Late in her career, a young interviewer asked her what she remembered about the abduction. The former abducted child looked past the camera for a long moment. "I remember the sound of the ramp opening," she said. "Not the station. Not the alien guards. Not even the fear, really. I remember light coming down the ramp. I remember smelling wheat." The interviewer waited. "Do you remember being rescued?" The former abducted child smiled faintly. "That is the strange part. No soldiers came through the doors. No explosions. No heroic charge. We were just told to walk. And when we reached the field, our parents were there." She folded her trembling hand beneath the other. Later, my mother told me what happened. She said humanity did not send an army because the Dominion knew how to fight armies. They sent patience. They sent preparation. They sent the thing our enemies had not bothered to imagine. The interviewer leaned forward. And what was that? The former abducted child's smile disappeared. Discipline. Across the room, several younger diplomats went still. She continued quietly. The Dominion expected rage. They expected grief to make us careless. They understood pain as a lever. What they did not understand was that love can become engineering when you give it 11 years and enough silence. No one spoke for several seconds. Then the interviewer asked, "Is that what humanity is?" The former abducted child considered the question. Outside the window, ships crossed the evening sky above Geneva. Human, Keth, former Dominion client vessels, even 2 Veth diplomatic cruisers moving under agreed flight law. Humanity is not one thing, she said. We are afraid. We are reckless. We are tender in ways that make no strategic sense. But when something irreplaceable is taken from us, we do not only get angry. She looked directly into the camera. We get to work. On Veth Prime, Grand Commander Sithrakva watched that interview alone. He was older now. Slower. His empire was smaller, though nobody inside the Dominion used that word. The hall behind him was dim. The banners still hung, but several had been moved to archival status after the species beneath them regained self-rule. When the former abducted child spoke, Sithrakva did not look away. He remembered the dark. He remembered the human face on the private screen. He remembered the moment he understood that the children had never been leverage. They had been a line. And he had crossed it. For the first time in years, Sithrakva opened the original Perseverance file. The transmission played in his private chamber, but he stopped it before the screams began. His hand hovered over the command surface. Then he deleted his personal copy. Not because he wanted to forget, because he could not. Many years later, on Perseverance colony, the wheat grew high over the field where the Dominion transports had landed. The scars in the soil were gone. The people were not. 312 adults walked there with their own children beside them. Some held small hands. Some carried toddlers on their shoulders. Some said nothing at all. They had come not for a ceremony, but because the afternoon light looked exactly the way it had looked when they came home. The former abducted child stood near the edge of the field, watching her granddaughter run ahead through the grain. The girl turned back, left. "Grandma, what does it smell like?" The former abducted child closed her eyes. Soil. Sunlight. Wheat. Memory. She opened her eyes and looked up at the first stars appearing in the pale sky. Somewhere out there, ancient powers still measured fleets, borders, weapons, and fear. Humanity measured something else. The former abducted child took her granddaughter's hand. Together, they walked deeper into the golden field. And behind them, the wheat closed softly over the old landing scars, as if the planet itself had decided the monsters were not worth remembering.
This story was never about revenge. It was about patience, discipline, and the kind of love that can move an empire without firing a single shot. The Dominion understood fear and control, but humanity showed them something stronger, restraint with power behind it.